Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our lovely little round table. My name is Yusif. I run Gaymers Inc. We are an LGBTQ plus gaming community. We want to try and get as many people as we can to join our lovely community, both our communities here, and make sure that we give people a safe and warm place for them to find one another and make friends. We do loads of events, so we'll go into that more as we go in through the talk. But here is Kat. I think it was the right hand.
Hi, so I'm Kat. I'm currently a digital analyst at Square Enix, and in my spare time I also run London Gamers, which is a group for anyone who is in London, who is LGBT or who is a gamer. I specifically run the Women, Non-Binary and Trans area, which is helpfully named Women, Non-Binary and Trans, where we organise dedicated events for marginalised genders. Do you want to give some more detail about yourself, Yusif? You kind of already did a lot, didn't you?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, it's absolutely fine. So we try to do as much as we can for our gaming communities. We try to focus a lot on our meetups. We find that a lot of people can struggle sometimes online to sort of really get out what they want to do, or if they are playing online games and stuff, they sometimes struggle with making those connections online. So what we try to do is give people a place to meet up, to really sort of get to know one another. We run gaming nights, pre-lockdown, we used to run loads of events. Our big main event was the Old Schoolyard meetup, our big gaming event on a Wednesday. We used to get loads of our members together, and we used to kit out the entire venue full of games, old school games, new school. We play Just Dance, we'll do VR, all sorts, and we'll just get loads of our gamers together, and we'll basically just get them to talk and make memories, which is something that we've hopefully been able to do for a lot of our members. And I'd imagine London Gamers has done exactly the same thing as well.
Exactly. So we've been running kind of very similar events, where we've been running stuff that's a little bit more our big events on a Saturday, and we run a couple more bits online. So we run, we have a very active WoW guild, we have a very active Dungeons and Dragons guild groups. Like, we've got a lot more. I feel like for us, our jump to online was a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but lockdown for us, we kind of just moved all of our in-person events to kind of an online space, but we already had quite a big existing online community, which was very lucky for us, I feel. But we're here today to talk about kind of loneliness and mental health and kind of feeling a little bit isolated, which, as we kind of come to the end of lockdown, I think it's very worrying, because we've kind of gotten to the point where it's almost so close to the end of lockdown that it's just such a little way to go, but it's just getting to that point where you're getting so close to the end, it's really feeling a little bit overwhelming. But loneliness doesn't just affect us whilst we're in lockdown, it also is going to affect us kind of all the time a little bit. It affects us day to day, sometimes, especially when people are kind of isolated. And obviously the end of lockdown isn't going to mean the end of people feeling lonely. Like, people can kind of feel lonely in day-to-day life. We asked London Games Festival to post a poll on Twitter, and they were fantastic, and they did. And they said, so we asked 2 questions, which were, first one was, how often do you feel lonely? And almost 80% of all respondents said that they feel lonely at least some of the time, if not more than that, which is a kind of quite shocking statistic, where we've got a lot of people who are feeling lonely a lot of the time. And when we've spoken about in our groups, I'm sure you've probably heard the same, a lot of people were feeling lonely before lockdown. And then lockdown has, a lot of the times, just made it a bit worse. It's made it a bit more constant. And for people who previously had a lot of social life that was in person, they've kind of lost a lot of that when lockdown happened. And with the kind of end of, at least in the UK, the kind of end of lockdown coming, we have to be cautious and careful about making sure that when we come back to those real life events, we aren't just we are still being conscious of the fact that people get lonely, and it's the 21st century. Everyone just gets lonely.
Yeah, it's definitely something that, as you said, Kat, it's something that it's not just happened because of COVID. Gamers, as we know, have always struggled. I mean, we've both experienced it, I'd imagine. I was very, very lonely growing up. I always felt like I was sort of the odd one out from all the kids because everyone was, it's very, very, very cliche, but it happens. Like all my friends used to go out and play football or do sports and stuff. And I would sort of just be at home playing my SNES and just be stuck in the bedroom because like that was how I escaped. That's how I was able to sort of escape a lot of things in my life, be it from coming out to realizing who I am, being a gay man. And that was sort of my escape without really knowing it was my escape. So I feel like it's definitely something that's impacted a lot of people. And especially with COVID, it's tripled it. It's made it so much worse. And what's worrying about the poll that we've sort of come across is the fact that because even though you can run a community and sort of say that you want to help those people will struggle to even ask for help. And I think that's why we tried to raise an issue on it, because people are always worried about talking about their feelings and worried about discussing it and saying that, you know what, I am actually lonely, I don't know how to cope with it. And this is why we're doing this.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's all very important points. Just before we kind of carry on, I just wanted to, because I forgot that we meant to start. We were meant to have another panelist with us today, Robin. Unfortunately, commitments have come up and he's no longer able to join us, but he was helping us plan all this, and so we're very thankful for him, and hopefully everything is all sorted.
You can see his name if you go down to Robin Media. He is there. So if you guys do want to, if everyone does want to find him and talk about anything with him, then his profile is there, so you can contact him.
Exactly. So we asked our groups kind of for what were their questions about loneliness. We kind of threw it out to all of our groups. We threw it out to London Gamers, to Gaymers Inc, and to Gaming Magazine to kind of ask them what are their biggest questions about loneliness. And we got a lot of responses. We've kind of summarized them into kind of like a couple of questions. If anybody has any further questions, we'd also love to hear from you. So feel free to drop them in the chat. I've also just put a couple of polls live of asking how often do you guys feel lonely, because it is important. But yeah, feel free to drop any in the chat, and we'll hopefully have time to answer them at the end. But the first one that we got from our groups beforehand was, how can we ensure that groups like women, non-binary and trans people, black people, people of colour, disabled people, people who are not in the scene, people who are more looking for friends, people who are not as outgoing, we can go on with like all these other kind of, I won't say marginalised groups, and not left on the sidelines during events, both real life and online. Like, how do you feel that we can deal with that, Yusif?
I think it's important as community managers, we both have to make sure that we're listening to what our members say. A lot of the time people get so, especially community management, we think so much on what is best for our group that sometimes we, in hindsight, don't realize that the solution is right there in front of us. And then by listening to our members, by listening to people who are approaching you with those problems, it's so important to make sure that you are trying to at least implement them, even if you think that, oh, okay, well, I see this question or I see this comment. How can I do this from my employees? How can I do this? Okay, well, I'll sort this out later. Just by at least acknowledging that there are problems or there are issues there, these people are at least recognize that, you are going to try at least to do something about it. At least that's the first step. By ignoring it and not being able to do anything, because sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes you can't do anything about it. Sometimes you just don't have the power to do it. Sometimes things take time. But by at least acknowledging it and saying that, we are going to try, we are listening, we are going to do something, it gives people a sense that, you care. And I think that's something that a lot of companies, especially when you get so big, you tend to forget the people who made it for you. These are the people who, gave you their trust. These are people who sort of like put their trust in you. So you want to make sure that you keep that, because these are the people who supported you. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to make sure that you are listening to them. How about you guys?
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys, everyone at LG are doing the exact same as well.
Exactly. I think something that we found is very useful is making sure that we have kind of like we have a specific dedicated space for women and non-binary and trans people. We have a lot of our events, we're working on making them more physically accessible. So we're making sure that we try and have more events that are wheelchair friendly, that are we have kind of quieter spaces for people who are potentially not going to be as good as in quite loud environments. We find that quite often having a really good mix of kind of like ages, of genders, kind of having that big mix of people really does help, because it does kind of then instill the fact that this isn't, it helps people feel more included. If you go to somewhere and you see 10 or 15 people who look like you, who feel like you, like that's why we're all here in the end, is so that we can is to meet people who are similar to us, who are also LGBT, who are also into games. And if you go to an event and you see like a bunch of people who kind of look similar to you, who act similar to you, who you have similar things in common to, it can really help to make you feel like less lonely in a crowd. I know a lot of people say that London is a very lonely city, and I feel like a lot of the times it is lonely, but a lot of times we can make it less lonely by working hard to try and make sure that we're making everybody feel included and making events that people feel like they can just go up to someone and start up a conversation. I think it is really important though, when we go back to a kind of more meet space, I want to say, events, that we do consider those accommodations that we made when it was online and not forget them. Like, I know that we've had a lot of people who have said that online events are really useful because it means that they can mute people, they can turn people's volumes down, like they have the ability to access something without leaving their home. For someone that's potentially immunocompromised, even going to a real life event could, even before COVID, could have caused severe issues. Going to somewhere where potentially they don't know about the allergies or other things like that. Or going to an event where it's too noisy, or where there's too many people, or it's too hot or too cold. There's so many different disabilities and accommodations that are needed out there, that I think it's important to remember that online, a lot of these, we need to remember that online solved a lot of these things, and we shouldn't forget them when we go back to kind of more real life events. But I think it's also important, again, to recognise where potentially we aren't perfect, and learn from that, and learn that we're growing. Not every event is going to be perfect for everybody. I know that both of us host quite active events, and like sometimes that's just not going to be someone's jam, and it's okay to have those events still, but it's important to consider, what are we doing to make other events more accommodating? Like, if you're hosting 20 events and 19 of them are not someone's jam, so long as there's that one there that is, I think that's good. But if there's none, then it starts to make people feel like they can't go to those events, or that they aren't able to access those events. And I think that can kind of add to the fear of loneliness of, if you're not able to kind of enjoy all the events, then it kind of makes you feel like an outsider a little bit. I think it's also important to remember the backgrounds of people. Like, not everybody who likes gaming is going to like every game. And
it's communication. It's sort of about communication. It's making sure that you are talking to your members as well. You're not just you're not an organization. We're not corporations. We're people. We're people who've started this group from the ground up, and we want to make sure. And we did this because we care about our community. We care about why we made this. And I think by making sure that you're constantly talking to your members, and making sure you're listening to what they need and what problems or issues that could potentially happen, I think it's so important, just to make sure that that outlet is there for them, so that when it does get to the point of events and stuff IRL, it's more easier for them to sort of know what they're going into without them being blind. So it's important, because it's by giving them that sort of structure and telling them that this is what you're going to get when you come to this event. These are the people who are most likely going to come to this event. If you're comfortable with this event, then please do come. If you're not, then this is what you're going to find. And I think that it sort of saves you the trouble of not really knowing, or sort of like when members have issues and stuff, and they come to you and they're like, oh, this is too loud and stuff. And by telling them already that this is the events that we hold, this is what we're going to expect. There's going to be music, there's going to be dancing, whereas opposed to a nice little chilled cinema event where we're going to throw away, it's going to be nice and quiet. that sort of gives people more of an understanding. So again, communication is so important for all of us.
Yeah, I think that's something else that companies can do as well, is that it is about listening to people. With the concept of EGX and E3 and all these big kind of gaming events coming back, it is important to look about what are we doing for our members in real life and what are we doing for them online, and talk to them and communicate with them. Like, I know so many fantastic community managers who spend all day working with wonderful, wonderful people, and they can make real changes in the game, like putting in accessibility functions or bringing in things. I know that Fallout 76 recently put in a wheelchair because it was a heavily requested item by the community. And it's sometimes making those accommodations to make people feel a little bit less lonely and a little bit more included in their community. Because there is also the thing of like making sure that people feel, if you can find your group, if you can find people that you get on with, then it can really help with that feeling of loneliness, especially when like you're working in an online gaming space. Like even with single player games, just having people who you can talk about the latest spoilers with is just something that's really, I think, lovely to have. And it's something which can really help deal with that loneliness sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just about creating that space, really, isn't it? It's just making sure that you are thinking of everything, and that making sure that, oh, well, is there a spoilers chat? Is there a chat for this latest game? Is there something for this? Like, and just making sure that you are giving, as a gaming group or a company or a corporation or community, you're making sure that you are doing everything you can, even if you think that you're very, very small compared to very, very big and you think you don't need it. 9 times out of 10, you will definitely probably need it, and it will make things infinitely more easier and better because you're giving people that outlet, you're giving people that chance to talk, because sometimes the only chance people get to talk could be about a trailer of a game or something they beat in a game that they couldn't beat for ages and they finally did it, but they are not really that active in the group and they want to share it. And by not having a space for them to talk about it, you're kind of not letting them be themselves and open up. So again, they're like, oh, well, I wish I had someone to talk to about this, but because there's nothing there for them to talk about, you kind of loses it, doesn't it? So it's really important.
Yeah, I think it's really lovely when you have, because there's loneliness and there's also loneliness of being your authentic self. Like there's some people who can be surrounded by people, but they're not out and they're not proud and they're not like out to the people who are there, and it can feel incredibly lonely to be in a situation where potentially you maybe have people around you, but you can't be your authentic self. And like, I think it's really lovely to see somebody kind of say something like, oh, I really love this trailer of this game because it's got this character in it who looks like me and acts like me. And other people who also are similar or can like chat about it, when potentially if they spoke to like potentially real life friends or other friends, they might not be able to talk about feeling real empathy for that character because they're not out to those people. I think that's something which can often happen. I feel like with LGBT especially, sometimes there are people who kind of live a little bit of a double life where they're talking, where they can't sometimes be themselves in front of family or some friends. And I think it's important to give them that space where they can be authentically themselves. But yeah,
absolutely. Should I read out the next question?
Yes.
So, I mean, if anyone has any questions on this, obviously, please do feel free to add in the chat. We are more than happy to open the space up for people. But yes, the next question that we had is, why do you think increasing loneliness affects people when they are even in work, and how can companies help mental health? So I think we touched base on that a little bit. I suppose, Kat, do you want to start on this?
Yeah. So I think it's, as I said, there is that loneliness kind of duality of potentially people aren't out at work, and it can sometimes feel very lonely to kind of go to work and potentially not, like, I feel like there's multiple strands of loneliness. That you can be lonely even if you're surrounded by people who are your friends. You can be lonely even if, like, there are some people who go into like a massively crowded room and go to a party and can still feel quite lonely. And I think it's important to remember that, like, not everybody, even if you go to work every day and you're talking to people, sometimes you're not talking to them, if that makes sense. Like, you have those conversations, you speak to people, but you're not really relieving that fear of loneliness. You're just kind of like, you're kind of upping the social bar on Sims, but it doesn't actually make you happy, or like you're just maintaining it to like a level. And I think it's important for companies to kind of have those groups and those socializing things. I know that, like, I speak to quite a lot of people day to day with LG. We've, like, on our Discord or whatever, and they'll be saying something like, oh, I'm having a really tough time at work because this is happening or that is happening. It's quite nice to be able to have that external support. But I also know that there's a lot of people who find that internally it can also be very lovely and charming, and like you can sometimes have a lot of friends at work who potentially you want to see a bit more. Like, I know that at Square Enix we've got a Pride group, and it's really lovely to have that because it allows us to meet other people at work and kind of have those connections, have those conversations. And I think especially with lockdown, with offices not being full, with some people working from home, some people working in the office, it can sometimes feel quite lonely because you are going into an office that's potentially very empty. And at home, potentially you're not seeing anybody or speaking to anybody. For some people, going to work where they are potentially out versus staying at home where potentially they might be with their families and not out, it can be a big struggle. And I think something that we can do is, as individuals and also as community leaders, and also as, like, I feel corporations can do this as well, is making sure that people feel like even though they are not potentially not out, they are supported. I think that's something that is really important, is allowing people to have that support and knowing that they are comfortable. And I think it's not just, support comes in many different ways, and it's not just going, oh, we have an employee assistance program, oh, we have a healthcare program. Like, those things can be great.
Take it. Yeah.
It's about having that, but also making sure that it's having more. It's talking to employees. It's having a chat with them. It's, if you can, have a socially distanced walk in the park. Like, I know a bunch of people have been doing that. It's about caring for people and not just going, we've ticked a box, I think. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You pretty much kind of nailed it on the head on a lot of the things. Actually, it's so important to make sure that it comes down to communications, and I know that a lot of people have struggles with communicating, because again, with mental health, don't quote me on the statistic for people communicating. I don't know it, but like, I can imagine it's a very high number that most problems people have is them not being able to tell friends or loved ones that they have a problem or they have an issue that they worry about. And I think it's especially hard, especially now during COVID times, where a lot of people have had to bring work home with them. And usually a lot of the times when you go to work, that's you going to work, and when you come back home, it's your safe space, it's your area where you can shut off and not think about work. And for a lot of people who've had to bring work back home with them, it's so difficult, because you're waking up and you're literally moving a couple of yards to your desk, starting your work, leaving, like going a couple more yards probably to the toilet or kitchen, come back and you finish work, and you're so tired, and then your bed is like right there, so you sort of collapse and you repeat. And it happens so often. And I think it's been especially hard now more than ever for a lot of people who've been working from home. But I think the only advice I can really give, or I'd imagine both of us, is the fact that we, as community management people, community leaders, are giving people a place where they can come and really turn off and switch off. So using Discord, using online gaming, using the chat systems on the groups, and just making sure that you are talking and you're communicating. It's very, very hard to sometimes really because sometimes when you just finish work, you just want to switch off. You just don't want to do anything. There are days when you just don't want to talk to anyone. And you know what? That's okay. That's absolutely fine. Sometimes it's absolutely fine to do that. No one is pushing you. No one's forcing you to be like, no, you have to talk to your friends. You have to talk to your parents. You have to talk to all your friends and loved ones. Like, no. Sometimes the best thing to do is just to switch off, because that's what you need. You just need your brain to recharge, and that's absolutely fine. And I think that's what a lot of corporations tend to sometimes get wrong. They sometimes push so much on people, like wellness programs and stuff, and it's just too much sometimes. And your calendar just gets full of like online yoga, online meditation, online running, online this, and it's just like one thing after the other, and you're just like, I just need to finish my work and then I can switch off. So I think by, again, what Kat said, by especially with corporations and big companies, if you make sure you're listening to make sure you're just listening to what your members and what your employees actually want. And sometimes that's just for nothing. Sometimes it's just for them just to ask if they're okay. Just be like, how are you doing? Like, I'm not gonna, my answer to you, the answer shouldn't be, oh, well, they're all struggling mentally. Okay, here's a 10 pack of yoga classes, go and do that. And then you just go back to your office and think you've done a good job. Like, there's so much more to it. There's so much more, like being able to sort of do more meetings and have one-to-ones. And sometimes I understand that obviously not big corporations can do that, but I think it's important just to make sure, like having morning meetings, and maybe every week, like have one meeting in the morning, and like during the beginning of the week and one at the end of the week, just to sort of have a nice little drink at the end of a Friday and be like, oh, we're just going to do drinks and not talk about work, and we're going to play games like Among Us, or just like little things like that, and just have a bit of fun. And I think that sometimes that's quite nice to have, rather than it just being all corporate yoga and meditation and here's your packs and go do that. Oh, and you think you've done a good job.
Yeah.
There's so much more to it.
Yeah. I think it's important to make sure that companies both don't do the tick box. They should do the tick box stuff, but they should do just more than the tick box stuff. Yeah. It's nice to give I know that I've really benefited from like doing exercise at home, but it's not just about just do those tick boxes. Do those things, do those social events. Don't make them mandatory. Don't make them that someone has to go to them. Signpost to things outside of work that aren't owned by work, but that that the company will pay for. Like, it's sometimes really nice to have something where it's sometimes really nice to have something in the office. It's sometimes really nice to have something outside the office. And it's important to remember as well that when we go back to, whether people go back to a fully remote, a partial remote, however we go back to work when potentially lockdowns are lifted, it's about understanding that these things shouldn't just evaporate. Like, we still need to care about our mental health. We still need to consider this. Like, I've been incredibly lucky that virtually every job I've been at has had very good mental health days, but if I needed to take a day off, I could just say, I'm just having a bad mental health day, and I could go home. And for me, that was an incredibly useful thing, but not everybody is going to feel that. I know that I've also felt that sometimes I didn't want to take mental health days because I knew that going to work and doing work would actually make my brain work better that day. And I think it's important to listen to individual employees and what they need, but also give your employees the space to talk up about it. I know that there's a lot of people that are worried about saying, oh, I have mental health issues to their boss, or talking about these kind of things. And part of the worry is that you're not certain if it's going to be accepted. And so it's very good to have members of staff who are senior point out that these are acceptable, have the schedules in place for stuff like mental health days or wellbeing days or group wellbeing activities, have these structures in place so that people don't need to say, I need this thing that you're not offering, but so that people can say, I need this thing that you are offering. Like, I think that's something that's incredibly important. And signpost some things outside of work. Not every studio is going to be a AAA super big place that can do all these different things. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it is totally okay to just go, yeah, we're not going to be able to offer that thing, but this group and this group offer it. Like, you need mentoring and you're someone that's marginalized gender, you can go to somewhere like Limit Break and get some of that kind of mentoring. Like, we can pay for some therapy, we can pay for some talking therapies, we can pay for some assistance programs if you need that. And it's about working out what your company can do at the size that it can do, and signposting where you can and doing stuff where you can't.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like it all starts from the top, right? It has to make sure that the directors are on board with, with their employees, and making sure that the foundation of mental health is looked after, because it's so important these days, where, I mean, back in the day, it was kind of spoken as taboo. It was not really spoken about at all. You got suicide rates so high. You got mental health, like, it was really bad. It was really, really bad until people really just started talking about it. And now I'm seeing ads everywhere of mental health. And I think by making sure that the top of the companies are making sure that they are offering this for their employees, it's yeah, as Kat said, it's definitely something that needs to happen. So you don't have to feel worried about going to your manager and saying that I'm just feeling really bad today, like I'm feeling like this or feeling like that, and I need a mental health day off. For them just to be like, oh, I don't really understand this, I don't know what to do, rather than if that is already set in place with your employer, then it's there already. So you don't have to feel worried about your job, or feeling worried about you might potentially lose your job because you're taking too many days off. And I know that is a big worry for a lot of people. So yeah.
In the end, it's going to be a case of companies having a welcoming atmosphere, and also it's okay to feel, I know it sounds stupid, but like, it's okay to not be okay. Like, even if you're in work and your work is talking to people, and like your manager's scheduling days to chat with you, and like everything, it feels like everyone's doing everything to help, but something still doesn't feel right. That's okay. And it's okay to communicate that maybe something isn't working. Like, you can have daily check-ins with your manager and still feel like something is missing. You're still feeling that kind of loneliness, or you're missing the office atmosphere. And it's okay to feel like that. It's okay to not, it's fine to communicate this, and it's fine to have these things. But it's also important for companies to understand that sometimes you can do everything, but you might not be able to fix every single thing. And it's important to try your best and not be afraid to just try. And like, it might not solve every single problem, but if you can make it a little bit better, it's important to make it that little bit better.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where, I mean, it will go on to the next question that we have, but it's very much along the lines of, you have to make sure, as hard as it can be sometimes, to ask for help by taking that first leap, by taking that risk. Not, I want to say risk is not a risk. It's help. You're helping yourself. It's something where, you're trying to overcome fear, overcome a big hurdle, a big obstacle in your life. And by taking that risk, by taking that first plunge, things will get so much easier after that, because the hardest part is just getting it out of your system, just getting it off your chest that, I'm lonely, and I want more friends. And just by saying it, it's not something to be ashamed about. It's not something to be worried about. Everyone goes through this. Everyone goes through this. And it's just something that we as community leaders, this is what we see on a daily basis. Like, we see this on every single day from our members. And I'm sure a lot of people who also run community groups have the same thing as well, where a lot of their members are doing the exact same. And sometimes the one thing I would say is just be careful how you perceive how people ask for help, because people won't necessarily say they need help by saying they need help. Sometimes it will come out in anger. Sometimes it will come out in frustration. And by making sure that you are communicating with those members, with those people, rather than just assuming that they're problematic or that they're aggressive or anything like that, you are giving them an opportunity to actually talk. And I think mental health especially can come in so many different ways, especially in loneliness, and people sometimes don't know how to communicate it. So it can come across in anger. Sometimes it can come across as saying things that you don't mean, but you have to make sure that you are giving them a space where they can talk to you and be able to come across in a safe way, rather than it being like, oh, we need to have a formal meeting and why did you do this and why did you do that? Instead of saying that, change your language to say, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Like, what's going on with you? Like, rather than being pointed and saying, no, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that. And I think that's something that, again, a lot of people can miss, because you speak out of anger sometimes and you don't mean it. And like, again, we've all done it. We've all said stuff that, sometimes we don't mean, but it's only human nature. We're only human. We'll make mistakes, but it's how we pick ourselves up after it that really matter. And what people like us as leaders, how do we go about helping them? How do we go about dealing with it, rather than just being like, no, you're problematic and move you to the side? There's so much more to community than just leading people.
Yeah. I think the final thing I have to say on this is, if you're a company and you're paying community managers, please pay for like therapists for your community managers, because having done this, I do it because I love it, and I can like turn off and I can not do it for a little bit because it is a voluntary position that I do. Mm-hmm. But like, your community managers pay for this and they deal with a lot more people. So just please, God, just pay for therapists for your community managers. Like, they need it.
Yes, agreed.
Should we move on? I can see Jamie's posted a question. We'll come to that one at the end. But yes. The other question that we had from before of how do you deal with reaching out to people, whether it's telling someone that you're struggling or when you feel like you're missing out on events or nervous about trying something new? So how can you make that leap to potentially coming to a new event or joining a new space? Do you have any suggestions for that?
So I would definitely say just reach out. Well, not even reach out. I mean, you can, along the lines, reach out to many community groups. But I think the first thing to do is just research as much as you can into what groups there are. I mean, London, geographically is tiny, but there's so many groups in London. It's crazy how many groups there are. But it's a wonderful thing as well. It's wonderful that there are so many people who are making those spaces for people to really be themselves, because in this age we are evolving, we are moving forward. A lot of people are starting to understand who they are, and I think it's important to make sure that we are listening to those people. And by you sort of making sure that you are, if you don't know who you are, for example, it's so important to make sure that you are researching what kind of groups that you want to go into. But then even if you don't know, just go along, just see what they can offer, because a lot of the groups are online based. So I mean, especially now of all times, like a lot of groups can't do anything IRL in real life, so they are doing everything online. And I think that is quite perfect, really, because it's a perfect opportunity for you to attend anything online and stay muted or turn your camera off and really sort of gauge and sort of observe how people are with each other and talk amongst each other. And then you never know, you might find someone who's also very quite shy, but because your skills on a game are ridiculously good, they're like, who's this person? Who is this? And then you realize that you've already made your group of friends without even realizing it. But I think there's more to it. We'll go into it, but Kat.
I think that's 100% right. I know that somebody said to me a few months ago, I thought when I first joined LG, I thought everybody was best friends with everybody and everybody had met each other in real life. But having been here for a while, I realized that everybody is like me. Nobody is kind of like, everybody is here because they want to make friends. And in the nicest way, when you join a lot of these kind of community groups, the reason why you've joined them is because you want to make new friends. People don't go and join a group. Yeah. Typically, people don't join a group with like a bunch of 6 friends and then only socialize with those 6 friends. People are always wanting to make new friends. That's why people join these groups. So I think it's important to remember that whilst everybody might seem like best buds, it's quite often not the case. And if they do seem like that, it's quite often because they have met through those groups. And I know for me, when I first went to an event a couple of years ago, and I was very nervous turning up. It was one of the first ever She Plays events, which we hosted. And I had never been to a group. I'd never been to a meeting. I'd chatted to some people online. And the thing for me that really stood out was the fact that I turned up and people that I'd spoken to just offhand online were there, and I knew that they were there and I knew I could talk to them. And so I think it's good to start, I don't want to say preparing now, but a lot of groups which have real life events are currently working online. It's sometimes useful to seek out those things online, have a chat to the people, kind of make some friends before you kind of even go there. I feel is often a really lovely way to kind of break the ice a little bit. And most of the time there's always people at most, if not all community events, there's normally like a greeter or someone who's like there to kind of chat to people. Like, I know that like quite often we've got, I think both of our groups, we have a habit of kind of like, we'll see somebody new and we'll be like, right, we're going to go and talk to this person because we want to make them feel welcome. And sometimes that can be really scary though. And I can totally understand that it can be. And so it's picking and choosing the events that potentially you're going to work best with. Like, I know that I really like big social events because like yammer on for days. I got confused there between chatter and yammer.
Maybe why not?
It's so good. But it's about maybe picking a different event. Like, I know that we've got Dungeons and Dragons events that are like 6 people, a very intimate group. We've got events that are much bigger. And I think that's also the important thing for other community groups to remember and other community groups to consider. Like, I know Gaymers Inc. do exactly the same. Like, you've got little events that for tiny, like little cinema trips, maybe like 10 or 12 people, all the way up to like massive events where you've got stuff booked out, tickets all sold out. Like, and it's important to look at the events and decide which one's going to work best for you. And it's also totally fine to just say, go to an event for just some of the time or go to an event during a quieter time. Like, there are certain times for LG's events, for example, that I know are going to be a bit quieter. And there's certain times when I know it's going to be a bit busier. And so if you want to come along just for the quiet bit, talk to those people. Like, if you go and talk to the people who are running the events, like if you're wanting to go to a quiz, but you're worried you're not going to have a team, like talk to the people that are running those events, because almost all the time they've got a bunch of people who are coming to them asking exactly the same thing. And I know it can be really scary, but the people who are running these events are running them because they want to make friends, they want to facilitate those friendships. They want to make more friends themselves. And I think it's important to kind of remember that everybody's a little bit in the same boat as you when you are scared about these things, that you're going to be able to, everybody had to make that jump at some point.
Yeah.
And everybody will know exactly how scared you are about it. And if you have to ping one message on Facebook Messenger and be like, I'm really scared about this, or even just like what is this event like? It's totally fine. And nobody's going to hold it against you if you turn up for 5 minutes, realize that it's not your jam and you want to go to a different event.
Absolutely.
Like, that's totally fine.
Yeah, it's complete. I mean, it's completely it. It's about making sure that you're creating an environment for people who are new, making sure that you're not forgetting your new members, but also not forgetting your old members, because there are people who have been there since the beginning. So making sure that you are listening to new and old alike are super important. But like Kat said, if you are new to an event and haven't been there before, like we've had many times where people have trouble getting tickets for one of our big meetups, and because we have to, for safety, we have to make sure that we are not overfilling the venue. And it's because at one point we had like 300 people at this event, and it was just insane. So from then we had to ticket it just to make sure it was safe, because people couldn't even get to the gaming stations. So I think that's also very, very important as community managers to make sure that you're aware of. If your events do become quite popular, make sure you are again listening to what your members need. And for us at that point, we had to cut down a lot of the space, an opportunity for people to have that enjoyment. But we had to make sure that we were keeping our members safe as well, and making sure that they have an opportunity to play games and talk to friends, rather than sort of it being like a clubby venue where they basically crammed into each other. But yeah, loads of people have commented on the event space and being like, oh, this is my first time. Like, can I meet up with anyone before we go? And because there is a bit of a distance walk before the place, there are little cafes and coffee shops and stuff. So people have sometimes met there, sort of talked amongst themselves, and then they've come together. And that's something we encourage. We encourage all the time to make sure that, you aren't going to be alone when you come here. Like we've got like movie stickers, and we've even done a newbie night for our members as well, to make sure that it's a night dedicated to them. Because again, like Kat said, when you're joining a community group, when you're joining a group, you're joining subconsciously because you know that there is something missing in your life that you kind of want to fill. There's something missing that you want to, you want to have more friends. You feel like, oh, I've just taken this new hobby. And what do people do? You go online and you search for that group because you want to find other like-minded people to help you with that, whether it be sewing, whether it be cars, like literally anything like that. You would, like 10 out of 10, you would go online and you would find a group because you want to sort of share that. So with gaming, you would be doing the exact same thing. You would sort of be going on because you want to find friends, you want to make more connections with people who play certain games or play board games or play Dungeons and Dragons, like what LG do. And that's something that is super important to make sure that you're aware of, especially as community leaders, making sure that you have that space for them and listening to them. So, you're giving them an opportunity to create those connections.
Exactly. I think I know that Jamie posted a question of how groups plan to accommodate those who find it difficult to face busy situations, those who want to join in-person events, but the events might be oversubscribed. I think from LG's side, at least, one of our big things is going to be to make sure that we continue those online events. Like, we've always had an incredibly active World of Warcraft guild. We have a selection of like loads of online games where people can just kind of drop in, have a chat. We kind of have a lot of those kind of, I want to say, unscheduled events. Like, we've got a Switch night every single week. We've got Dungeons and Dragons events every single week. We've got World of Warcraft stuff. We've got board game nights. We've got loads of different events that are kind of ongoing. And I think it's important when we move from the kind of online spaces to kind of after lockdown that we do still continue those events. We do still have those online events. And obviously not every event is going to be able to do that. Like, I feel like potentially having a old school yard in person and online would just be the most rambunctious thing that you could ever consider. But it's about considering and having like something like a quiz, for example, you can have on both systems. And not everything is going to work that way, and not every group is going to want to do that move. But I think it's also a case of thinking about, we are going to need social distance more. I know that from our side, we're already thinking about what can we do outside more, what can we do that allows us to have that extra space, to have that extra movement. And it's about having those precautions, having those safety measures. We already have those in place for everything else. Like, we already think about it from like a fire safety. We think about it from like a basic like health and safety perspective. And it's a case of thinking about it from a COVID safe perspective. What can we do to make those events bigger? And maybe it's run 2 events and each of them be half the size. Maybe it's run 1 event but we limit tickets. Maybe it's run an event but we find a bigger venue or more spaced out venue. Obviously, it's quite difficult for both of our groups that we are trying to look for spaces that work well for both video games but also have enough space for people. And obviously with London being what it is, it's sometimes quite difficult to find those spaces.
A lot harder.
We've been incredibly lucky that we've got a skate bar on board. We've got fantastic small indie bars. We've got larger venues that are able to accommodate us, like Bad Moon Cafe. Like, you guys have got Old Schoolyard. You guys have got Brewers, isn't it, as well?
Yeah,
like, it's all of these wonderful places. Yeah. But it's so difficult to sometimes find those places. And we've spent a long time working on building up those relationships. And it's important to remember that sometimes, even when we have all of these spaces, we have to then consider what we're going to do post-COVID. Are those places even still around? Thank God. I think most of ours are. But
yes, thank God.
I think it is going to be important, though, to make sure that we do consider, when we look at new venues, I think we're always considering what new venues are coming up. Like, I know that I've been looking at Platform, at Rule Zero, a few places like that, and seeing, are they able to have that kind of safe atmosphere for COVID? And if they are, it's fantastic, because we're able to add those places to our kind of listings, I want to say, of places that we can hold events. But Discord, Zoom, Facebook, all of these places that we use already online aren't going to go away. And I think it's fantastic that we've managed to get them all kind of like rolled up, because now we can host those kind of larger scale events in a kind of dual atmosphere, I want to say. Like there's going to be places where we can't, but I feel like a trampolining night isn't going to work well on Zoom. But potentially some events are going to work okay in a kind of either we host one in real life and one in online, or we host some events online, some in real life. And it's going to be a case of working out how it goes. But I don't think there's going to be a perfect solution for any of this. But I think it's something which we can constantly work on.
Yeah, I mean, we have to learn as we go, right? I mean, when we come out of COVID, I mean, it's been a year. That is a large mug.
This is my COVID coffee mug.
I was going to say, my goodness, what are you drinking out of? But yeah, I mean, like I said, we're learning as we go, right? It's one of those cases where it has been an entire year since we've had to stop doing events IRL. And for us personally, as Gaymers Inc, where we did most of our events IRL, it was extremely hard. It was quite a challenging time for us because loads of our members rely on meeting up and rely on seeing their friends. And this is the first time in a very long time that friends couldn't see each other, not just in gaming, but everyone. And it was a learning curve. It was a big learning moment for everyone to sort of realize what was quite important for me anyway. And I think in terms of our events, it's definitely, I mean, once we come back out of COVID, we've again got a lot of stuff planned which we want to try and get back into, but it is extremely hard because it's when people do ask us, especially like, why can't we find a bigger venue for these events? Like we always say that we do these events because in these venues because they're more intimate. If we take them to larger venues, we lose that connection we have, that intimacy that we have with our members, because by having these smaller places we can go to our members. And it takes me back to the point we made when we said that communicating with your members is so important, making sure you're talking to them. And this is what we do at our venues. This is what we do at our events. We talk to our members, we have jokes with them, we play games with them. We don't make it corporate, we don't make it a business, we make it something fun. And by taking events to larger places, we, yes, lose that opportunity of having more of our friends come, but it strengthens the relationships we do have. And by having more and more events throughout the month, it still gives people a chance to come to them. It still gives people a chance to go to all these events and still carry on those conversations and those friendships. Nothing is stopping anyone from going to different events. And yes, maybe sometimes one event is the only one you're interested in. And obviously, if that is the only thing that you are interested in, it's try as hard as you can to come, I guess. It's very, very difficult because it's one of the decisions that we as leaders have to make sometimes, is that we can't cater to every single person. We can't cater to everyone, but we do what we can. We're only human, and we can only do as much as we can to sort of help everyone out as much as possible. But venues are a lot harder to get than people think, because we have to think about spacing, storage, internet. Is it secure, like security wise, is it safe? Like, are we gonna, if we do something in the evening, do we have to worry about people trying to come in and steal stuff or start fights? Like, are we sure that we have the whole venue to ourselves and having security at the door? Like, there's so much more to running an event at a venue than just turning up and making sure the power is there, making sure that the safety is working, and making sure that wires are not everywhere and sticking out, fire exits are checked, and so many things. There are so many things to check at events that people think.
It's not just about the safety that's kind of the physical safety, because being LGBT spaces, we do also have to think about like the actual venues themselves. Are they safe to get to? Are they suitable for our groups? Like, is this area is this bar LGBT friendly? Are people going to get assaulted walking home?
Yeah.
Are people going to have these, like, if two men walk out of the bar holding hands, are they going to get assaulted on the tube? Is it a safe area to be in? Luckily, London is an incredibly welcoming city, but there are still places where
still happens.
Potentially it's not as welcoming, and it's about trying to find those venues. I think it is a case where after lockdown, I think there's definitely going to be changes to all of us on how we organize events, like whether it's ticketing, whether it's having like first refusal, second refusal type things, whether it's having more events in the open air. I, for one, am very excited to have like a barbecue somewhere because I need the grass. But it's events like that where you consider like Black Pride was held a couple of years ago in a massive park, and it was absolutely fantastic from the photos I saw of it, where it was just like a very open space.
Yeah, we were there.
But those obviously, they obviously come with their own problems when you have outdoorsy events as well, because obviously there's power issues, there's safety issues, blah blah. But it's going to be a definite balance to have. And obviously, if any spaces wish to also have want to talk to us about our venues, we're always. I feel like both of us are just like, yes, please, venues, come and talk to us. But it is also difficult because we also want to try and support. I'm sure it's the same for you. Like, we want to support. We don't just want to go and say, well, let's hire out a big conference area that's owned by a massive company. We want to try and support those kind of like smaller businesses, the ones that are dedicated to gaming, because they're the ones that are going to. We give them as much as they give us. We bring a lot of traffic to them, and they support us in turn by making sure that we have these lovely spaces that are just lovely and beautifully set up and supported and everything.
I mean, especially now with so many LGBT bars and venues closing, it's so important that you're making sure that you are, if you are especially an LGBTQ plus community group, no matter what kind of genre you are, if you're gardening or if you're sewing or anything like that. I don't know why I keep going to sewing, but it's important that you reach out to those venues, because especially now where people are, especially now they think that it's, everyone is so accepting. Like, I remember seeing a poll of question where a lot of people were asked, do you feel safe in a bar now? And it was asked to a lot of LGBTQ people, and quite a high number, quite a high percentage was actually that they felt fine going to a straight bar as opposed to going to an LGBT bar. And as good as that may sound, that isn't as good as it sounds to everyone, because it's these venues, these places are safe havens. They're safe places for so many people. And it's so important to support them. It's so important to support them. This is why we try to go to any type of venue that we go to. We always go to LGBT venues, because we want to make sure that we are supporting them and that we are keeping them open, and we are giving them an opportunity to stay open by giving them a different sort of view. And because there are so many like gay people, age range, it's all over. So by going to a venue where, so for example, Eagle, we do a couple of events at the Eagle, and their clientele sometimes can be a little older. And we've had people who have come to the venue where we've done events, go to one of our nights and be like, oh, this is really nice, and I'm actually a bit of a gamer myself. And we've actually had a few people join because they didn't think a community group like us even existed, until we went to that venue to say, yeah, we're here, just come play games and stuff. And I'm sure like when you guys do your events at the Welly as well, you guys get people joining as well and be like, oh, what do you guys do?
We legit had so many people come in to She-Bar when we last hosted an event there, and it was just lovely because there were so many women that came down and was like, oh yeah, I'm a gamer, but like I wouldn't ever call myself a gamer. Or like non-binary people coming in and being like, I didn't realize this even existed for me.
Yeah.
And it's like it was just so lovely to have people come and like almost not realize that we existed.
Yeah.
That like there were, like one of the people said, I can't remember exactly the words, but it was along the lines of like, I didn't realize there were other women out there like me. And she caught herself and was like, oh, I meant obviously like gamers. And I was like, I love that was her thought process of like, oh, there's other lesbians, but there's no other lesbian gamers. And I thought that was just a lovely kind of like concept that's kind of stuck with me for quite a while.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of the time, so we did actually also ask our members how they deal with loneliness. But is there any particular things that you yourself, Yusif, how you deal with loneliness personally, of like any techniques or anything that you do?
So for me personally, I actually joined a Final Fantasy, like when COVID first started. I joined Final Fantasy 14 online, and I didn't think I would dive into it as much as I did, but I think the last time I checked, I've spent about 950 hours on that game. Insane.
I, for one, would like to say thank you so much for paying my salary.
That's over a month non-stop playing. Oh, my Siri watch just said LOL. It's listening to me. My Apple Watch. But no, it's completely caught me. And what's actually made it really, really great is the fact that I've joined a Discord group, and it's a Final Fantasy 14 one, and it's become quite a big place for a lot of the gamers, because a lot of the gamers have joined, and it's become quite a nice open space. And I can't start my day without logging in onto Discord and just being like, morning everyone. And it's kind of just been ingrained in me every time I wake up now, and just sort of speak to people, because a lot of people rely on just having that bit of communication every day, and it's so nice to see sometimes. But I think for me, what's really worked is that I've kind of taken on a bit of fitness as well. Like, me and my boyfriend, we go for walks every weekend. We kind of just switch off, don't check our phones, and we just go for a long walk around Greenwich and then come back. And then we give ourselves a time to just play games. And he's started an Instagram account for plants, because who hasn't bought plants over COVID? But he's really good at it, and he's teaching people how to sort of care for their plants and stuff. And I think that's a really nice not coping mechanism, but just a nice way of dealing with it, by taking up something that you like and then you love, and sort of just experiment with lots of different things. Like, we have so much time on our hands, a lot more time than you think, especially over COVID. So just go online, see what takes your fancy. If you think that you liked drawing but never sort of got into it, go back into it and sort of just be like, yeah, I'm just going to post a couple of pictures and see what people think. If you like singing, just sing on Instagram and post it. I know a lot of people won't, but like, it's just one of those cases of just being brave and being confident. I know it's a word a lot of people tend to overlook sometimes, because they think they are, but when you actually ask them, are you okay? You're not. And it again, like Kat said, it's fine to not be okay. It's fine to admit that you're lonely and that you want more friends or anything like that. But I think it's important just to make sure that you are doing everything that you can, changing your mindset to think that, instead of just waking up and rolling to the other side of the bed, pick up your phone and be like, you know what, today's going to be a new day. I've got a schedule I've written down the night before. I'm going to try and stick to this. And this is what I'm going to try and do. And sometimes you fault. No one's going to force you. No one's going to tell you off and be like, no, you should have done this. Why didn't you do it? It's all down to you. And I think you are, as cliche as it sounds, you are the only person who can make a change. No one should really do that for you. And I think it's important that people like us, who are community leaders, we give everyone a platform where you can be yourself. And we try to encourage the best out of you. And I think that's what and a lot of people do a lot of the time. We try to encourage you to be the best you can be. So have faith in yourself and just be confident in yourself, because we believe in you. How about you, Kat? What advice would you give?
I think my big one has been that I try and make sure that I talk to somebody every day. Like, whether it's talking to somebody online, dropping someone a phone call, even if it's just like over like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, like just trying to talk to somebody. Like, I reached out to one of my friends where I just sent her a meme and was like, oh, this made me think of you. And like, we had a nice like 40-minute chat over it. And I think something to remember is that it's okay to feel lonely and to be scared about reaching out, but people who you know are going to answer you. And like, if they don't, maybe it's like it's kind of, I don't want to say it's on them, but like, maybe they've just had a tough day. But like, don't let that put you off. Like, I messaged somebody and I didn't get a response for like 3 days, and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, work has just been snowing me under, blah blah blah. But I'm always trying, I think that's something I'm trying to do, is like make sure that I talk to somebody who isn't like at work, who isn't somebody who I kind of have to community manage, or somebody else. And I think for me, having regular schedules like for D&D has kind of really helped. Like, I love Dungeons & Dragons. I'm a massive nerd for it. But it's the same thing of like, I like talking about it to my friends or talking to other people about it. And I think that's something very useful and important. And I think I agree again, like it's find the interest groups and remember that like it's not people who are there to make friends with you. I know that sometimes like you'll join something and somebody will maybe make a really like there's sometimes where like your first experience of a group will be really terrible, and I know that can be absolutely heartbreaking when like you message somebody and they're like, oh no, I'm on PlayStation, you're on Xbox, but it's okay to sometimes try that again and remember that like it's not just once and gone. Like you can have a second introduction to a group and you can have a second chance in a group. So if there's a group where you've maybe been like, oh, this wasn't maybe for me, if the concept appeals to you, give it a second shot. And if not, there's probably another group out there that does exactly the same thing, but maybe is a different city or a different brand or a different like genre or whatever. We did also get a bunch of comments as well from our communities. I'm just going to summarize a couple of them. I think one of them was really key was the kind of acknowledge that you are lonely. Like say it to yourself, like I'm lonely, and talk to people about ordinary things. Like ask somebody how they're doing, like reach out to those people who you maybe haven't spoken to in a while, who maybe might be feeling just as lonely as you. I think that's really important. And there's also things like talk to hotlines, find groups that you can interact with. Like there's definitely loads of different groups. Like you're a really big fan of Final Fantasy. I'm pretty sure there's a Final Fantasy Discord out there.
Yeah.
You're a really big fan of such and such. There's going to be Discords and groups, but there's also Facebook groups, WhatsApp chats. There's so many different ways to communicate in 2021 that like if one of them isn't working for you, try a different one. I think someone actually said that.
Yeah, it's literally just the next one. The next one down just after the hotline.
Yeah, the finding Twitch to be a good place to chat and hang, like chatting with streamers and fellow viewers. I think that's a fantastic one.
Yeah.
I love chatting to people about it. And there's also the one of like finding something to keep you busy. Finding something to do and then find someone to do it with. Like it's totally fine to just sit there and knit together. Like there's a knitting group locally to me that just go on Zoom together and just have a knit and a natto, and it's like that's always really lovely.
Lovely. No, that's really nice. I mean, I think it's important to make sure that you're, like that Kat said, if you have a bad experience with someone or a group or something, don't automatically think, oh well, I've tried and that's it. I'm not going to try again. I'm going to be lonely forever. I'm going to be alone forever. It's like, come on. It's one of those cases where you have to, don't taint an entire group with the same brush. It's so important to make sure that you are going from, it's like game what's it called? Game crawling. Like when you, like, for example, one thing I always like to say to some of our newbies when they come, especially to one of our gaming nights, is like, just go to, if you're especially coming by yourself, or if you've got someone who's just standing at a bar alone, I'll always be like, oh, come join. And think of it as like game crawling. So let's pick up a controller and talk to the person next to you and just like play games. If you don't feel an immediate sort of like connection with that person and it kind of feels a bit awkward, just be like, thanks for a great game, and then move on to the next one. And it's just making sure that you are trying, because one thing that one of the suggestions said is just make sure that, it's don't always wait for someone to take action. You have to make sure that you're considering other people are struggling too. So just because that one person was a bit standoffish, it could be because that person is feeling the exact same way you are, because they feel a bit like, oh, this person is standing next to me, I don't know what to say to them. What do I say? Oh, yeah, okay, thanks for a great game. Okay, and then quickly run away. People are going to be different levels of comfortable around new people. So you always have to be aware of who you're talking to and engage them, and like just try to pick up on a bit of body language and make sure that you are being welcoming and trying to sort of make sure you are aware of what they do as well, not just what you do.
Yeah. I think I feel like we've answered a lot today. Thank you so much for everybody who's watched along with us. Thank you so much for answering the polls, for answering our questions beforehand.
Thank you, everyone.
As always, you can reach out to both of us. We're both on Twitter, and our groups, London Gamers and Gaymers Inc, are both online. You can find us in all of your favourite social media sites.
Yeah.
We've both got Facebooks and Twitters and Discords. It's lovely. Yeah, there you go. I sadly didn't put on my t-shirt today, which was my bad. But thank you so much for joining us. I think that's everything, because I have many more things to do today.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for Kat for joining as well. This was a lovely day, and thank you for to Michael and Laura, who had organised this for us. So thank you so much. But yeah, like Kat said, if you have anyone that you think that might be great or suitable, think this is a great community for us or for them, then please, obviously, fire them our way. If you have any questions, please do, again, message us. Our names are just on the side. I think I'm pointing in the right direction.
I hope one of us is. Let's
But yeah.
We're one side or the other.
But
yeah, drop either of us a message, and we're always happy to have a little chit chat. And if not right here, then probably on Twitter or Facebook or
Instagram,
wherever you're
or anywhere. Yeah.
All of those places. Thank you so much again for joining me today, by the way. And we'll say bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.